So imagine for a second that there's this, like, invisible leak in your body.
Right, like a slow drip that you can't even feel.
Yeah, exactly. You're doing everything right. You're drinking your water, you're eating your greens. Maybe you even take a multivitamin every day.
But despite all that, you just feel completely drained.
Right. It's that feeling of being totally exhausted, but also, like, completely wired at the same time.
Yeah, physically you're just done, but your brain is going a million miles an hour and you can't focus. It's incredibly frustrating for
It
people.
really is. And the mission for today's deep dive is to figure out exactly why that happens. We are looking into this really fascinating, almost paradoxical relationship between the human stress response and magnesium.
Which is honestly one of the most misunderstood minerals out there.
Definitely. So we're going to unpack this concept called biological leakage. And we're also going to decode the whole supplement aisle because, spoiler alert, the magnesium you have in your bathroom cabinet right now is probably the wrong kind.
Oh, almost certainly the wrong kind. And you're probably taking it at the wrong time of day, too.
Right. So looking at the sources, the core paradox here is just wild to me. Basically, the more stressed you are, the more your body literally dumps its magnesium.
Yeah, it flushes it right out.
But then the less magnesium you have, the more susceptible you are to being stressed. I mean, it's like trying to bail water out of a sinking boat, but the bucket you're using actually has a giant hole in the bottom.
That is a perfect analogy, actually. And to understand why that bucket is leaking, we have to kind of unlearn what we think about minerals.
What do you mean by that?
Well, when we think of minerals, we usually think of structure. Like calcium is for hard bones, iron is for your red blood cells, static stuff.
Right, like building materials.
Exactly. But magnesium is totally different. It's not static at all. It's dynamic. It's basically the body's ultimate currency for calming things down.
The sources mentioned it's a cofactor in, like over 600 enzymatic reactions.
Over 600, yeah. Meaning there are 600 separate processes in your body that literally cannot happen unless a magnesium ion is physically sitting there to turn the key.
That is insane.
Yeah.
So it's not just a nice-to-have vitamin, it's fundamental hardware.
Totally fundamental. It regulates muscle contraction, blood pressure, protein synthesis, and even making ATP, which is the actual microscopic energy your cells run on.
Okay, but for this stress paradox we're talking about,
Mhm.
the source is really focused on the nervous system, something about it being a natural calcium channel blocker.
Yeah, so when a nerve fires, calcium rushes into the cell. That's the signal that excites the nerve.
Okay, got it. Calcium equals excitement.
Right. But if that channel stays open, the nerve just keeps firing and firing. You get overexcited. Magnesium's job is to sit in that channel and act as a physical brake pedal.
So it literally stops the nerve from short-circuiting.
Exactly. It forces the system to reset. So if you don't have enough magnesium, you lose your brake pedal. Your entire nervous system is just permanently overexcited.
Okay, I have to ask, though, because I see magnesium everywhere at the grocery store. Is this really a widespread issue for normal people, or is this just something, biohackers worry about?
Oh, no, it's a massive population-wide issue. Surveys show that at least half the population isn't even getting the bare minimum daily requirement from their food.
Just because of our diets?
Diets, yeah, and our soils are super depleted from modern farming. But that's just the intake side. When you add in chronic modern stress, the rate that we burn through that tiny bit of magnesium goes through the roof.
So let's talk about that burn rate. The sources call it the vicious circle of stress. How does a stressful day actually cause a biological leak?
So this was first mapped out back in the 90s by these researchers, Galland and Seelig. They showed that your body's stress response doesn't really care what the stress is.
Meaning it reacts the same to a bear attacking as it does to a bad email.
Exactly. The brain drops the exact same chemical cascade. You get a surge of adrenaline, noradrenaline, cortisol.
The classic fight or flight dump.
Right. And those chemicals are super excitatory. So to stop those chemicals from damaging your own tissues, your body has to buffer them. It literally yanks magnesium out from the inside of your cells.
Wait, it pulls the magnesium out of the cell. Where does it put it?
It pushes it into the extracellular fluid, basically flooding your blood serum with it.
Oh, wow. So if I'm having a panic attack over a work deadline, my blood magnesium actually goes up.
Temporarily, yes. It's called transient hypermagnesemia. The body floods the blood with its calming currency to hit the brakes and manage the stress.
Okay, I mean, that sounds like a great system. It's protecting us.
It is great if the stress is short. You run from a predator, you survive, the stress ends, then the cells just absorb the magnesium right back up.
But I'm guessing that's not what happens with a toxic boss.
Nope. Because with modern life, the magnesium floats in the blood and eventually it goes through your kidneys. and the kidneys act as a filter.
Uh-oh, I see where this is going.
Yeah, the kidneys see all this extra magnesium in the blood, assume it's just waste, and they flush it out through your urine.
So you literally pee away your brake pedal.
Exactly. That is the biological leak. And because modern stress never stops, that tap just stays open. You are constantly leaking.
That's terrifying. And the animal studies in the sources really paint a clear picture of this, like that study with the guide dogs.
Oh, the guide dog study is brilliant. They tracked dogs going through intense guide training, specifically looking at how the physical stress and the weather affected their magnesium.
Because training to be a guide dog is super demanding work for an animal.
It is, and they found that in the winter, when it was freezing cold outside, the dog's baseline magnesium was way lower than in the summer.
So just being cold was a stressor that drained their minerals.
Yeah, environmental stress. But then they looked at the younger dogs who weren't used to the training yet. After a workout in the winter, their blood magnesium just plummeted.
Wow, so the cold stress plus the exercise stress created this massive compounding leak.
Precisely. They dumped the reserves just trying to cope with the environment and the physical exertion.
But, most people listening aren't doing intense physical labor in the snow. Mostly we're just sitting at desks feeling anxious.
Right, which brings us to the university student study. They tracked students during their final exams.
Just sitting in a library taking a test.
Yep. And they gave them psychological questionnaires to measure their anxiety. Then they measured their urine. As their self-reported anxiety went up, the amount of magnesium they peed out went up exactly in lockstep.
So the pure psychological dread of a test was physically draining their minerals.
Exactly. And another study showed their red blood cell magnesium stayed depleted for 4 entire weeks after the exams were over.
4 weeks. That's insane. And then there was that noise study, right?
Yeah.
That one blew my mind.
Oh, the noise stress study. They took healthy guys and just exposed them to loud, awful industrial traffic noise for a few hours.
Just sitting in a noisy room.
Mm.
And it triggered the leak.
Textbook leak.
Yeah.
The magnesium left their red blood cells, spiked in their blood, and then dumped into their urine.
But the craziest part was the timeline. The sources said the leak kept going for 2 full days.
Right. 2 hours of loud noise caused the kidneys to actively flush magnesium for 48 hours.
So if you live in a noisy city or you're always checking your phone, you never stop leaking. Which perfectly segues into this concept from the sources called the GUTS model.
Ah, yes. The generalized unsafety theory of stress.
I loved this part. It completely flipped how I think about stress. Can you break down what GUTS actually means?
Sure. So normally we think you're relaxed, then something bad happens, you get stressed, and then you go back to being relaxed.
Right, like an on and off switch.
But the GUTS model says no, your default factory setting as a human is to be stressed out.
Wait, really? We're born to be stressed.
Evolutionarily, yeah. If you're an early human out in the wild, assuming you're safe is a good way to get eaten, so your stress response is constantly running in the background, just in case.
Wow, okay. So when does it ever turn off?
It only turns off when your brain gets highly specific signals that you are absolutely safe. Like you're in a secure burrow with your family and you have food.
So if those safety signals aren't there, the alarm just keeps ringing.
Exactly. And think about modern life. An office cubicle with fluorescent lights and a boss you hate doesn't have any evolutionary safety signals.
So even if I'm just answering emails, my primitive brain thinks I'm in danger.
Yes. You exist in a state of chronic, generalized unsafety, so you never stop leaking magnesium.
That makes so much sense. And the sources compared the symptoms of this chronic stress to the symptoms of magnesium deficiency, and they are basically identical.
It's uncanny. Both lists include fatigue, irritability, mild anxiety, muscle tension, and headaches.
So when people say, oh, I'm stressed from work, my shoulders are tight, I have a headache.
They might literally just be feeling the physical symptoms of severe cellular magnesium depletion. Your body just doesn't have the minerals to relax the muscles or calm the nerves.
That completely changes how you view your own mood. Like, am I actually an anxious person, or is my hardware just out of brake fluid?
And we see this in the animal genetics. The sources talked about these 2 strains of mice, the MGL and MGH mice.
Right. The ones bred to have high or low magnesium from birth. What happened with them?
The MGL mice, the ones born with naturally low magnesium, had way higher baseline levels of noradrenaline in their brains.
So they were basically born into fight or flight.
Yeah, their hardware was inherently anxious, they were restless, they got hyperthermia super easily, and when researchers put them under a physical stress test,
Like restraining them, right?
exactly, the low magnesium mice developed significantly more stress-induced stomach ulcers than the high magnesium mice.
Oh, same exact stressor, but the ones without the mineral took massive physical damage.
Yeah, they couldn't buffer the chemical panic. And in behavioral tests, like the forced swimming test or the dark box test, they showed way more despair and anxiety. They just gave up faster.
So if we apply that to humans, it's a huge question. Are we walking around thinking we're just naturally neurotic or pessimistic, when really we're just chronically depleted?
It's a huge focus in nutritional psychiatry right now. If your brain literally lacks the cofactors to hit the brakes, the whole world feels incredibly threatening.
Okay, so I'm sure someone is listening to this right now thinking, okay, I feel this. I'm going to go to my doctor tomorrow and get a blood test to prove my magnesium is low.
Oh man, and this is the biggest, most frustrating trap in modern medicine.
Because the blood test is useless, right? Why is that?
Because of how magnesium is stored in the body. You have about 25 grams of it in you. Half of it is locked deep inside your bones.
Right, in the skeleton.
Most of the rest is inside your muscles and your organs. Only about 1% is outside the cells. And of that, only 0.3% is actually circulating in your blood serum.
0.3%. That is nothing.
Yeah.
But that's the exact puddle of blood the doctor is testing.
Exactly. It's like checking the oil dipstick on a car, seeing it's full, and assuming the car is fine, even though the engine is literally melting itself down to make that oil.
Wait, what do you mean melting itself down?
Because your heart needs a very specific amount of magnesium in the blood to beat properly. If your blood levels drop even a tiny bit, you could have a heart attack or a seizure.
So the body protects the blood at all costs.
Ruthlessly. It activates these cells called osteoclasts that literally eat your bone matrix to pull magnesium out of your skeleton and dump it into the blood to keep the levels normal.
That is genuinely horrifying. It's cannibalizing my bones, so my blood test looks fine.
Yep. By the time a standard blood test actually shows you have low magnesium, you are in a severe metabolic crisis. Your bones and cells are completely dangerously empty.
The sources mentioned that standard lab ranges consider anything between 0.7 and 1.0 to be normal.
Right, but researchers are begging to change that. They say chronic latent deficiency starts below 0.85.
So millions of people are in that 0.7 to 0.85 range being told they're perfectly healthy while their bones are literally leaking.
Exactly. One study looked at stressed people and found 44% of them had this hidden deficiency, but their doctors would have said they were fine.
Okay, so if the blood test lies and the listener knows they're stressed and leaking, the obvious next step is to run to the pharmacy and buy a big bottle of magnesium pills.
And that is the second massive trap, because the supplement aisle is an absolute minefield.
We need to talk about magnesium oxide. I went and checked my multivitamin after reading the sources, and sure enough, it's oxide.
It's almost always oxide. It's the cheapest, most common form on the market.
If it's so bad, why is it in everything?
Economics.
Yeah.
It's incredibly cheap to make. And the molecule is tiny, so they can cram 400 or 500 milligrams into one small pill. It looks like a great value to the consumer.
But the label doesn't tell you the bioavailability. How much of that oxide pill do you actually absorb into your blood?
Clinical studies show it's about 4%.
4%. Okay, so I buy a 400 milligram pill, I swallow it, and I only absorb 16 milligrams. What happens to the other 384 milligrams?
It just sits in your intestines. Magnesium oxide is basically an insoluble salt. So it sits in your gut and creates this massive osmotic gradient.
What does an osmotic gradient actually feel like in your stomach?
It feels terrible. Because it's a dense salt, it acts like a sponge. It forcefully pulls water out of your body's tissues and dumps it into your intestines to dilute the salt.
Oh no, so it rapidly floods your lower intestine with water.
Yes. And the mechanical result of that is explosive diarrhea. It's a super strong laxative.
So the dark irony here is you're stressed, you can't sleep, you buy magnesium oxide to fix it, you absorb none of it, and instead you give yourself massive digestive trauma.
Which is just another huge physical stressor. It spikes your cortisol even more, and you leak whatever magnesium you had left.
Wow. Okay, but let's say the listener is smart. They avoid oxide, they go buy a high-quality magnesium. They're still not safe because of what the sources call the medication thieves, right?
Right. Modern medicine cabinets are full of drugs that actively block you from absorbing minerals. The biggest offenders are PPIs.
Proton pump inhibitors.
Yeah.
Like standard heartburn and acid reflux meds. Millions of people take those every morning. How does an acid pill stop a mineral from working?
It comes down to the microscopic bouncers in your gut. Most magnesium is absorbed through the tiny gaps between your intestinal cells. It's called the paracellular pathway.
Okay, the gaps between the cells.
But it's a guarded door. There are these structural proteins called claudin 7 and claudin 12. They check the magnesium's ID and let it into the blood.
Got it, the claudin bouncers.
But those bouncers are super sensitive to stomach acid. They only work if the pH in your gut is slightly acidic, between 5.5 and 6.5.
And heartburn medicine is literally designed to kill stomach acid and raise the pH.
Exactly. So the PPI artificially raises the pH, the claudin proteins change their physical shape, and that door to the bloodstream just padlocks shut.
That is wild. So you could take the best supplement in the world, but if you're on a PPI, it just bounces off a locked door.
Yep, it just passes right through you. Long-term PPI use is a massive cause of severe magnesium deficiency.
Are there other drug thieves we should worry about?
Definitely. Blood pressure meds, specifically thiazide diuretics. They force your kidneys to excrete water to lower your blood pressure, but they indiscriminately wash out tons of magnesium with it.
So they just widen the hole in the bucket. And I saw antibiotics on that list too.
Yeah, certain antibiotics like tetracyclines, if they meet magnesium in your gut, they chemically bind together into this giant lump that your body can't absorb. It ruins both the supplement and the antibiotic.
That's why the bottle always says to space out your pills.
Yeah.
Okay, so the cheap stuff is useless, and our meds are blocking us. How do we actually fix this leak?
We have to use organic chemistry. We need chelated forms of magnesium.
Chelated. That's a buzzword you see on the expensive bottles. What does it actually mean?
Chelation is when a lab takes the raw magnesium ion and chemically binds it to an amino acid or an organic acid. It gives the magnesium a VIP disguise.
Oh, so the gut doesn't see it as a mineral anymore.
Right. It sees the amino acid and actively pulls it right through the intestinal wall, totally bypassing those claudin bouncers that the PPIs block.
Okay, that makes total sense. And the sources break down 3 specific chelated forms, starting with magnesium L-Threonate. I'm calling this one the brain hacker.
Oh, threonate is incredible. It was specifically engineered by scientists at MIT to solve a very specific problem: the blood-brain barrier.
Why is the blood-brain barrier a problem? Can't the brain just take magnesium from the blood?
You would think so, but the blood-brain barrier is like an impenetrable fortress. Its job is to keep toxins out of the brain, and it is notoriously stubborn about letting standard magnesium in.
The sources mentioned a clinical study that proved this, right?
Yeah, researchers pumped test subjects full of standard IV magnesium. They boosted the magnesium in the subject's blood by an insane 160%.
So their blood is just flooded with it. Did it get into the brain?
Barely. The magnesium levels in the cerebrospinal fluid only went up by 15%. The fortress walls just blocked it.
So that's why MIT stepped in. They had
Yeah.
to invent a key.
Exactly. They chemically bound magnesium to L-Threonic acid, which is a metabolite of vitamin C. The blood-brain barrier recognizes the L-Threonate and just lets it walk right through the front door.
So it actually gets into the brain tissue. And the clinical results of this are just mind-blowing.
Hmm.
Let's talk about the 9-year reversal study.
This is a landmark trial. They took adults aged 50 to 70 who were already showing early signs of cognitive decline, brain fog, memory issues, struggling to focus.
And they gave them this magnesium L-Threonate every day for 12 weeks.
Right, about 1.5 to 2 grams a day, and they tested their brain age before and after.
How do you even measure a brain age?
You run them through standardized cognitive tests for memory and processing speed and compare their scores to averages for different age groups. At the start, their physical age was around 58, but their brains were performing like they were 68.
Wow. Their brains were a full decade older than their bodies. That is so scary.
It is. But after 12 weeks on the threonate, their cognitive processing speed jumped by 20%.
20% in 3 months.
Yeah, and when they recalculated the data, the participants had effectively reversed their brain age by 9.4 years.
So they literally undid a decade of cognitive aging just by giving the brain the specific mineral it was starved of.
Yes, and the animal studies show us exactly how the hardware actually changes to do that. They tested aged, memory-impaired rats in a complex water maze.
And obviously the old rats couldn't remember where the hidden platform was.
Right, they just swam around aimlessly. But after a month of drinking water with L-Threonate, those old rats could navigate that maze just as fast and accurately as the young, healthy rats.
That's incredible. What is the physical change happening in their brains?
It's all about synaptic density. A synapse is the connection point between two brain cells. As we age and as we get stressed, those connections physically thin out and die.
Which causes the brain fog and the memory loss.
Exactly. But the L-Threonate provides the raw material to physically grow brand new brain cells and create new synaptic connections, especially in the hippocampus, the memory center.
The sources said the rats had a 67% increase in synaptic density.
Yeah, they literally rebuilt the physical architecture of their brains.
Okay, but I have to push back here. Because 20% faster processing, 67% more synapses. Is this just a stimulant? Like, is it basically just Adderall or caffeine?
It's a really common question, but no, it is absolutely not a stimulant.
Because stimulants just force a chemical dump, right?
Exactly. Caffeine forces your nervous system to dump excitatory chemicals. It overrides your fatigue, burns through your reserves, and guarantees a massive crash later. It's like whipping a tired horse.
Right, the horse runs fast, but it's suffering.
But threonate does the opposite. It's not forcing the brain to work harder. Think of it like a city with terrible traffic. A stimulant forces all the cars to drive 100 miles an hour on broken roads.
It's fast, but super dangerous.
Yeah. But threonate is like sending in a construction crew to build new highways and bridges. The traffic moves smoothly because the infrastructure is better. You prevent the loss of connections.
That is a great analogy. Okay, so threonate is the brain hacker. Let's move to the second form. Magnesium bisglycinate or just glycinate? I call this one the calming agent.
This is the absolute gold standard if you want to downregulate your central nervous system and relax. It binds magnesium to the amino acid glycine.
Why glycine specifically? Does it do something on its own?
Oh, absolutely. Glycine is a really potent inhibitory neurotransmitter all by itself. It naturally lowers your core body temperature and calms overactive nerves.
So you combine the magnesium, which blocks the calcium channels, with glycine, which is already a relaxant.
Exactly. It's a double-barreled calming compound. It aggressively targets your parasympathetic nervous system, your rest and digest mode.
And the sources heavily link it to GABA, right? Can you explain what GABA is?
GABA is the main inhibitory chemical in your brain. If adrenaline is the gas pedal, GABA is the emergency brake. It stops racing thoughts and prepares you for sleep.
And glycinate boosts that.
It enhances the GABA receptors, so the brake pedal works way better. Plus, you need intracellular magnesium to naturally produce melatonin for deep sleep.
Okay, but what about the oxide problem? If I take a massive dose of glycinate before bed to sleep, am I going to wake up at 2 a.m. with massive diarrhea?
No, and that's the beauty of chelation. Because it's bound to glycine, your gut absorbs it through specific amino acid channels. It doesn't just sit in the intestine pulling water in.
So it doesn't cause that violent osmotic gradient.
Nope. It's incredibly gentle on the stomach, even at high clinical doses.
So this is perfect for the wired and tired person. You get in bed, your body is exhausted, but your brain is stressing about tomorrow. You take this, and it chemically forces the brain to chill out.
Precisely. It's also great for physical muscle soreness and full body anxiety.
Okay, the third form from the sources is basically the polar opposite of glycinate. Magnesium malate. This is the energy producer.
Yes. Malate is magnesium bound to malic acid.
The powerhouse of the cell.
Exactly. Malic acid is a critical component of the Krebs cycle. That's the physiological process that takes the food you eat and turns it into ATP, the cellular energy currency.
Everything your body does burns ATP.
At every heartbeat, every muscle flex. And the catch is magnesium has to physically bind to the ATP molecule for your body to actually use it.
So by taking magnesium malate, you are hand-delivering the exact 2 ingredients the mitochondria need to crank out energy.
Right. It directly feeds the energy factory. That's why it's super stimulating.
They use it for chronic fatigue syndrome and fibromyalgia, don't they?
They do, because it helps clear muscle fatigue and lactic acid buildup. It's amazing for athletic performance or morning brain fog.
So you definitely do not want to take malatate right before bed.
Definitely not. It would be like drinking a double espresso at 10 p.m.
Which brings us perfectly to our final section. Timing and optimization. Having the right tool is useless if you use it at the wrong time. How do we build a real protocol based on chronobiology?
Chronobiology is just the study of your daily circadian rhythms. Your hormones and cellular needs change completely from morning to night.
So let's start at 8 a.m. What does my body want?
In the morning, you get a massive natural surge of cortisol to wake you up and get your blood pressure going. Your body demands high energy and stress buffering for the day.
So this is when I take the magnesium malate.
Exactly. Take it with breakfast to fuel the Krebs cycle. Or if you have a super heavy mental day-like writing code or intense meetings, you take the Threonate in the morning to fuel your focus.
Light for the body, Threonate for the brain, all in the AM. Now, what about the PM?
At night, cortisol drops, melatonin rises, your nervous system needs to shift out of fight or flight.
So 30 to 60 minutes before bed, I take the magnesium glycinate to hit the GABA brakes.
Perfectly executed.
But wait, I have a question about Threonate. Because sleep is when the brain heals and consolidates memories. Shouldn't Threonate work best right before bed? The sources had a super weird warning about this.
It's a huge paradox, yeah. Threonate is great for long-term brain health, but if you take a large dose right before bed, it can cause insanely vivid, intense, sometimes exhausting dreams.
Really? Why does fixing synapses give you crazy dreams?
Because threonate aggressively increases rapid neuronal firing in your hippocampus. If you time that peak exactly when your brain enters REM sleep, which is when you dream and process memories, it's like pouring high-octane fuel on a fire.
Oh, wow. So your subconscious just goes into hyperdrive.
Yeah, your brain becomes hyperactive in its processing. Even if it's not a nightmare, it causes super fragmented, restless sleep, so you always want to keep threonate in the morning or early afternoon.
Good to know. Okay, let's talk about food interactions, because this part
Yeah.
genuinely blew my mind. I'm calling it the spinach paradox.
Ah, the oxalates. It's a brutal biological catch-22.
It really is. Because every health blog says eat tons of dark leafy greens, eat your spinach to get your magnesium. But the sources say oxalates, which are in spinach, actually block magnesium.
They absolutely do. Oxalates are these highly reactive anti-nutrients. In your gut, they aggressively bind to positively charged minerals like calcium and magnesium.
And what happens when they bind?
They form these hard, insoluble crystal complexes. Your body's transport proteins physically cannot absorb them. They just pass right through your intestines and out in your stool.
So let me get this straight. The exact plant that has the highest magnesium also has massive amounts of the exact chemical that blocks you from absorbing it.
Yep. The plant evolved oxalates partly to stop predators from digesting its minerals.
So if I buy a fancy, expensive bottle of glycinate and I take it with a giant green spinach smoothie, I am actively destroying my own supplement.
Yes, you are chemically sabotaging it in real time. The oxalate crystals handcuff the magnesium before it ever reaches the VIP door in your gut.
That is mind-blowing. So you have to take your supplements well away from high oxalate foods like spinach or almonds.
Absolutely. And there's one more optimization trick. Split dosing.
What does that mean, just breaking the pill in half?
Basically, it's about a physical bottleneck in your gut. Even the VIP amino acid channels can only process so many molecules at once. They get saturated.
So if I swallow 400 milligrams all at once, there's a traffic jam at the door.
Exactly. Some gets in, but the excess just sits in your gut and gets flushed down the toilet, literally.
So the strategy is to take two 200 milligram doses, maybe 6 or 8 hours apart.
Way superior. It keeps you below the saturation limit, maximizes absorption, and gives your body a steady stream of minerals all day instead of a massive spike and crash.
Okay, let's take a breath. We have covered so much ground today. Let me try to summarize this.
Go for it.
We started by realizing that modern life, with its endless stress and generalized unsafety, is forcing our bodies to constantly leak magnesium through our urine just to survive the day.
And because the body cannibalizes our bones to keep our blood levels stable, standard blood tests will lie to us and say we're fine while our cells starve.
Right. Then we learned that buying cheap magnesium oxide is a trap that only absorbs at 4% and ruins your stomach. And if you take PPIs for heartburn, you've basically padlocked the doors in your gut anyway.
But there is a solution if you use the right chelated forms at the right time.
Yes. Milady in the morning for cellular energy. Threonate in the day to cross the blood-brain barrier and reverse cognitive aging. And glycinate at night to activate GABA and get deep sleep. And we keep it all away from our spinach smoothies.
You nailed it. It's all about targeted metabolic management.
Awesome. Okay, before we sign off, I want to leave everyone with a final provocative thought. We briefly mentioned the NMDA receptor earlier. Can you explain what that is?
The NMDA receptor is a crucial protein complex sitting right on the synapses of your brain cells. Neuroscientists consider it the master biochemical switch for neuroplasticity.
Meaning it controls how we learn and adapt.
Exactly. It controls how you form new memories and change your mind. But it relies on a delicate balance. The channel is physically plugged by a magnesium ion when resting. It only unplugs when a strong learning signal comes in.
So magnesium is the literal gatekeeper of our biological ability to learn.
Yes, it is the key to cognitive flexibility.
Okay, so here is the thought to mull over on your commute. We know that chronic stress constantly drains magnesium from our brains. The vicious circle means we are constantly leaking it.
Right.
So if this generalized unsafety of modern life is causing a species-wide magnesium depletion, are we collectively losing our neuroplasticity?
That is a very deep, unsettling
I
question.
mean, are we literally losing our biological capacity to learn, adapt to massive global challenges, or even just change our minds when we get new information,
Yeah.
just because we are too chronically stressed to hold on to the magnesium required to do it?
The biochemistry strongly suggests that our patience and cognitive flexibility are entirely tied to this one leaking mineral. Are we becoming a more rigid, angry society because our biological buckets have holes in them? Wow. That is definitely something to think about next time you feel yourself getting incredibly angry over a minor, stupid email.
Truly.
Well, thank you for joining us on this incredibly deep journey today. Take a hard look at your supplements, check your forms, patch the leak in your bucket, and if you found today's deep dive valuable and want to keep taking control of your health, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss our next major investigation, where we'll be breaking down the exact same kind of hidden, shocking truths about vitamin D3. Until next time, keep digging.